What should you pay for Old Forester allocated bourbons? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So today we're talking about Old Forester allocated bourbons and what you should pay for them. So big caveat here is, this is my opinion, this is my list of prices and what I think is fair for each of these bottles. Your results may vary, your opinion of Old Forester may be very different, your willingness to pay for bottles might be different, your aims and goals in bourbon might be different, and that's all okay. What I still like to do is provide as much information as I can and tell you what I think now that I've owned all these bottles and tasted them. So what I do walk through here is, what is the MSRP on these bottles? Whether or not I think that's fair and what I would be willing to pay over that in the case that I wanted to hunt one down. Or if it doesn't even live up to MSRP, I'll let you know that too. And then also I try to factor in the amount of effort and rarity of these bottles as part of the equation of what it might be worth paying for them. So that's how we're going to break it down. We'll start over here with Old Forester single barrel strength. So this bottle, MSRP here is $80. Is it worth that amount of money? I would say yes. I think that this is super high octane whiskey. Usually these are in the like 125 plus range. This one's 130 proof. What I'd compare these to is very similar to the Jack Daniel's single barrel strengths, which when you look at it are more in that $70 to $75 range at MSRP, and I think that's pretty fair. These are packed full of flavor. Mine in particular has a big brown sugar banana note on it. It is not super old whiskey. These are usually in that 4 to 6 year old range and can be a little bit hot. So with all that in mind, I would say the most I would pay for an Old Forester single barrel strength is $100. I've seen it at that price point a lot of times, especially stores that do picks of it, and I think that's probably fair. You don't see it all the time. I see it hit my market every once in a while. Like I said, a store might do a big pick of it, and then it's sitting on the shelves for a month or so. But these don't tend to sit around for long, and I think they're just rare enough to justify that $100 price point. But if you see it for $80, I think that's really its sweet spot, and it definitely justifies that. Okay, so let's move into the next three here, which are all part of a series, the 117 series. This is a particularly interesting intricacy of Old Forester. By the way, I am a pretty big Old Forester profile fan, so that does factor in here. That's why I have a good number of their allocated bottles. But even I am kind of intrigued by what's going on with the 117 series. So the three bottles I have are more what I would consider up my alley as a strictly more bourbon loving bourbon drinker. But I've got the extra old, the High Angel Share Batch 3, and the Warehouse 1 barrels of the 117 series. So each of these, the MSRP here is $60. So $60 for the extra old. What this essentially is Old Forester 1910, but kept in the barrel for around 18 months, I think is what it says on here. Yes, 18 months in that second barrel that adds all that sort of double oaked goodness. Usually it's in the barrel for about 7 to 9 months, they say. So they're pretty much doubling that, and it shows. I mean, this thing is a candy bar in a glass. It is so sweet. So much banana, candy runts, so much brown sugar. But what I would say is, like, it almost toes the line on too much. There's an oakiness to it as well. Proof here, it's the same as Old Forester 1910, 93 proof. This is batch 2, by the way, so pretty new. It's worth $60. That's the MSRP, that's what it's worth. I wouldn't pay any more than that. I do not think that this is adding super intense quality to the 1910. It may even go over sweet for a lot of people. In my mind, I kind of compare this to the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, and I've had that and I think that's probably a better presentation of a sort of extra old, extra oaked process. So when you factor in that if you were going to get a full bottle of this, which is, these are only 375 milliliters at $60, it would be 120 bucks. That's quite a bit, and I don't think it deserves much more than that. But for the experiment and to try it, $60 is fine. So next we have the High Angel Share. This is batch 3, again 375 milliliters for $60. I think this one is worth closer to $70 to $75. This is really, really good stuff. I wish I could own a full bottle of it, and I would pay that 120 bucks, no doubt, for a full bottle of this whiskey. Huge cherry bomb, very sort of spice driven with that cherry. Probably the spiciest kind of presentation of Old Forester that I've had. That definitely comes from, these barrels tend to be in the higher rick houses, and it really shows. It's pretty powerful stuff, and I think the proof point, it's only 110 proof points, so it definitely shows off its power, and it's really, really good. So maybe in that $70 to $75. All right, so then we got the Warehouse 1 barrels. This is a really interesting one. Basically, they took these from the hottest floors of their warehouse as well, but they know and told you what the age is here, and that is 11 years old. So you got 11-year-old Old Forester whiskey that's super powerful. It's 95 proof, which I think fits its aged profile pretty well. But this is $60 MSRP. Oh, it's worth that. It's 100% worth that. I think this is one I would pay somewhere in the $80 to $85 range to get. It's one of the best noses I have ever smelled in my life. And I've only had it open for a little bit. I think it's gonna get way, way better. The palate, because it's 95 proof, was maybe a slight letdown, but it's one of the more well-aged, better put together products from Old Forester that I've had, and it's delicious. Okay, so these might be the two that people are most interested in hearing about. We'll start with Old Forester 1924. 10-year-old whiskey, 100 proof. Not the typical Old Forester profile in terms of it's a different mash bill. This is actually the mash bill that goes into King of Kentucky from Brown-Forman. So it's slightly different. This one ruffled feathers when it came out, part of the Whiskey Row series, an annual release for $115 MSRP. A lot of people were saying it's probably not worth that. I think it's also tough when you compare to 1910 and 1920, which are sitting at that $60 price point, so basically half the amount of money, and are known as very, very good values. 1924, $115. What would I pay? What would I recommend you pay? I would recommend you pay $115. That is what I think this whiskey justifies. I do think it justifies its MSRP though. A lot of people say that this was a big letdown. In my personal opinion, I've tasted it, especially as it's opened up, and I've experienced it, put it in blinds. It's doing really well, and it's grown on me a ton. So $115 for this well-aged product makes sense to me. I wouldn't pay anything over that. I've seen it released in places like Costco, other wholesalers for $100. I actually went out and bought a second bottle of this, the 2025 release, for $100. And I feel like that is a very fair price. $10 a year, I'm happy to pay that. $115, I think it justifies that. But I think as the market kind of showed us, it's not really worth too much more than that. I wouldn't pay $130, I wouldn't pay $150. Definitely wouldn't pay $200 bucks. But $115 for the current whiskey market makes sense. All right, let's move on to the big kahuna, Old Forester President's Choice. This bottle is $225 MSRP. It is their most exclusive whiskey, pretty much only available at the distillery. I got mine through an online sale that they did, and I pretty much just got lucky getting in the queue and being one of the people who actually got to hit buy now before it ran out of stock. Mine is aged 11 summers, so pretty much 11 years old, just like the Warehouse One. It's batch number 82 or barrel number 82. It's 59.7% alcohol, which, if I can do some quick math, is 119.4 proof. Yeah, it's freaking delicious. That's true. I mean, it's just great whiskey. It has a particular cherry, sandalwood, really interesting profile here. It's kind of similar to the High Angel share for me with the amount of cherry that it brings, but definitely more amped up, more power, and just more complexity. What is it actually worth? Is it worth the $225? Is it worth more than that? So I ended up paying all told around $280, given taxes and shipping, because I got it online. That's about what I would max out at for this. $225 I think is fair given the rarity, and I've heard that some of these can be some of the best whiskey you'll ever taste. I have tasted others. Tasted one at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival this past year, and it was delicious. It's one of the best things we tasted the whole festival. So $225 is fair. I think $280, what I paid. I don't feel bad about it, but I feel a little gypped, wishing I could have gotten it for MSRP at the distillery, but still, $225 is fine, $280 is fair. If you, knowing that you only ever have one shot to get it, basically, since this is so rare, wanted to pay $300, I think that that is okay for this whiskey. I think that that's a justifiable choice. For me, the $225 feels like the most fair spot, but certainly because of the rarity, you can go a little bit above that. Now, would I pay $400, $500 for it? Absolutely not. I'm not even sure I think any whiskey really is worth over $300. That's where a threshold I haven't really passed yet, and don't really plan to pass unless something crazy happens and I just have no choice, really. Well, I'll have a choice, but you know what I mean. I'm staring at something that just, I have to buy. Maybe it's Pappy 20 or 23 or something like that. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. Let's recap here and just say that Old Forester, across the board here, for me, these all justify their MSRP, which is great. Even President's Choice, which is very expensive, I think is worth it, and some of the oldest, more special stuff from Old Forester. And then all the way down to these 117 series that are only $60 MSRP. Some of them I would pay a little bit more than that because they're really interesting experiments. And then you've got the 1924 and the single barrel strength that if you pay MSRP, I think you're getting a pretty fair value. I think that recaps it all. Let me know in the comments below what you would be willing to pay for certain Old Forester products. Is there one in particular you think is worth more than MSRP, or you're hunting and you know you would pay more? Are there any of this list or ones I didn't talk about that you think are just not even worth MSRP? And by the way, I did leave any rye off this list. It's just the bourbons. But would be curious to know what you think about the rye stuff as well. Okay, so I think that's gonna wrap it up, everybody. Hope you all are enjoying your whiskey these days and maybe sipping on some great Old Forester stuff. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.